There comes a moment in every relationship, especially with someone who fears closeness, when the truth they've been running from finally catches up to them. You're on their mind, far more than they ever planned, admitted, or prepared for. Avoidant individuals pride themselves on independence. They build emotional escape routes like architects designing a fortress. They convince themselves that feelings make them weak, that needing someone makes them vulnerable, and that attachment is something to avoid, not embrace. But then you happened. You didn't chase. You didn't beg. You didn't script your life around their appointments of uncertainty. Instead, you showed up as a person grounded in your own worth. You spoke with warmth, but you didn't collapse your needs. You gave connection without losing yourself in the process. You walked with emotional clarity instead of emotional chaos. And that's what changed everything. Because avoidants don't fall for people who are easy to control. They fall for people who are hard to forget. They don't open up to the loudest voice in their face. They open up to the steady, calm energy they can't shake no matter how far they run. When the avoidant realizes you're always on their mind, it doesn't happen in a dramatic movie scene. It happens in the quiet moments. It's when they're lying in bed and your smile shows up uninvited. It's when they reach for their phone, then pull back, then reach again. It's when they try to distract themselves. But your absence feels louder than your presence ever did. They remember the way you listened, the way you didn't rush connection, the way you respected yourself even when it hurt. And suddenly the space they demanded becomes the space that feels empty. The silence they created becomes the silence that echoes your value back at them. The independence they clung to becomes a reminder that they've lost something that made life feel unexpectedly safe. That's when the shift happens. Not because you tried harder, but because you didn't. Not because you pushed, but because you paused. Not because you begged, but because you built a life beyond the pause they created. When an avoidant realizes you were always on their mind, it's the first time they understand that distance doesn't protect them. It isolates them. And it's the first time they see that the person they kept at arm's length is the very person who made their world feel warmer, lighter, more meaningful. And whether or not they come back, whether or not they try again, know this. You were unforgettable because you lived with intention, clarity, and emotional integrity. You didn't lose them. They lost the version of you who was willing to give them a chance. And that realization, that's what stays with them far longer than your presence ever did. When it comes to relationships with avoidant individuals, one of the most important truths to understand is that your value becomes clear not through chasing, pleading, or proving yourself, but through the boundaries you set and the respect you maintain for your own emotional space. Avoidants often have a deep-seated fear of dependency or vulnerability, and they tend to equate closeness with a loss of control. This means that when someone tries too hard to gain their attention or approval, it can trigger a defensive response, pushing them further away rather than bringing them closer. The paradox is that the more you chase, the more they retreat. But when you stay grounded, calm, and self-respecting, your presence begins to register in a fundamentally different way. It signals confidence, stability, and emotional intelligence, qualities that are inherently attractive and memorable. By maintaining your boundaries, you demonstrate that your happiness and sense of self are not contingent on their approval or constant validation. You make it clear that your life, your energy, and your emotional well-being are your own. This doesn't mean being cold or distant. It means valuing yourself enough not to overextend, not to sacrifice your own needs for the sake of gaining someone else's attention, and not to compromise your principles to fit into their emotional comfort zone. Avoidants are instinctively drawn to people who exhibit this kind of self-possession because it contrasts sharply with their habitual experiences of dependency, drama, or emotional volatility. When they encounter someone who is steady, consistent, and aware of their own value, it disrupts their usual patterns. Instead of feeling smothered, they feel curious. Instead of feeling pressured, they feel intrigued. Your boundaries also teach them something they may have long avoided: emotional responsibility. By showing that you can hold your own ground, you communicate that relationships are not about control, manipulation, or games. They are about mutual respect, honesty, and care. This kind of emotional clarity forces avoidants to confront the ways they've avoided intimacy in the past. It creates a mirror that reflects not just your worth, but also the gaps they've created in their own relational lives. They start noticing that the person they once took for granted has standards, integrity, and a life that doesn't revolve around their whims. Over time, this combination of calm confidence, self-respect, and clear boundaries makes you unforgettable. You become a reference point in their mind, a standard for what connection can feel like when it is secure, grounded, and meaningful. Unlike someone who chases, pleads, or bends over backward to accommodate their fears, you occupy a space that is inherently magnetic. Your value is not defined by how much attention you can extract from them, but by how fully you inhabit your own life while remaining open, kind, and emotionally available. This is what makes an avoidant person start to think of you more than you might even realize. They can't force themselves to forget the way you carried yourself or the energy you brought into their world. It is your presence, your boundaries, and your unwavering respect for yourself that leave a lasting imprint on their mind. Avoidants remember the quiet strength you walked with because it is rare, steady, and different from anything they usually encounter. They are accustomed to relationships that are turbulent, unpredictable, or emotionally demanding, where closeness feels like an obligation or a risk rather than a source of comfort. In contrast, your presence was calm, consistent, and emotionally intelligent. You didn't overwhelm them with desperation, nor did you pull back in frustration. You simply existed with clarity, warmth, and an unshakable sense of self. This quiet strength is disarming because it doesn't fit into the familiar patterns they've built around fear and avoidance. It's not loud, it's not flashy, and it's not designed to win them over in the moment, but it is deeply, profoundly memorable. They notice the way you carry yourself in moments of tension, the way you speak when emotions are high, and the way you respond with balance instead of chaos. It leaves an impression that lingers long after you've left the room. What makes your quiet strength so impactful is that it is rooted in self-respect and emotional maturity. Avoidants are drawn to people who have a life outside the relationship and who do not make their attention or approval the measure of your worth. When you demonstrate that your happiness does not depend on their immediate responses, you create a form of magnetic stability that is irresistible. You show them that connection does not require surrendering your identity or losing yourself in someone else's fear. In their world, this is revolutionary because they have often encountered partners who either chase, plead, or mirror their avoidance in unhealthy ways. You, however, walked a different path. You listened when they spoke, but you did not take on their fears as your own. You offered support, but you did not compromise your boundaries. You demonstrated patience, but you did not allow patience to become passivity. All of this sends a powerful unspoken message that love, care, and respect are strongest when they coexist with personal integrity. Avoidants have a long memory for the people who teach them this lesson without trying to teach it. They notice the subtle cues, the way you remain steady under pressure, the way you acknowledge your own needs while still holding space for theirs, the way you do not chase but still engage with care and warmth. These qualities do not scream for attention, yet they echo in the mind of an avoidant long after the interaction has ended. Over time, the quiet strength you display becomes a reference point for them, a benchmark of emotional clarity and maturity that they cannot easily forget. It challenges their usual strategies of emotional avoidance because it reveals what authentic connection feels like. A connection where both people can exist fully without fear or neediness. Ultimately, it is this combination of calmness, consistency, and self-possession that makes you unforgettable to an avoidant. They may not admit it, they may even resist it, but your ability to remain grounded while showing care leaves a lasting imprint on their mind. Your quiet strength becomes a memory they return to in moments of reflection, the standard against which all future connections are measured, and the reason your presence lingers far beyond your physical proximity. Space doesn't make avoidance forget you, it makes your absence louder. And this is one of the most misunderstood aspects of their psychology. Avoidants often assume that distancing themselves or creating emotional gaps will protect them from attachment or vulnerability. But the truth is, distance does not erase the impact you have on them. Instead, it amplifies it. When you step back, when you give yourself the room to breathe and live your life fully, it forces them to confront a reality they may have been avoiding, that the person they pushed away or kept at arm's length holds a significance they cannot simply dismiss. In the quiet, when they are alone with their thoughts, your presence, or rather the memory of your presence, begins to occupy space in their mind in ways they did not anticipate. Every text unanswered, every invitation declined, and every silence you maintain without anxiety becomes a subtle reminder of what they're missing, what they can't control, and what they may not get back easily. Avoidants are highly sensitive to patterns, and when those patterns are disrupted in a way that doesn't involve chasing or pressure, it creates an internal dissonance. They are forced to notice the emptiness left behind, the moments where your energy could have been present but is now absent, and the gap that no distraction can fully fill. This isn't about punishment or manipulation. It's about the natural consequence of your steadiness, your self-respect, and your refusal to shrink yourself for their comfort. When they pull away, the absence of your presence highlights the emotional clarity, warmth, and stability that you brought into their life, a clarity they are not accustomed to experiencing. It is this clarity, this lack of drama combined with deep care, that resonates far more powerfully than any attempts to control or reclaim their attention ever could. The irony is that while avoidants flee from emotional closeness, the very qualities that trigger their avoidance are the ones that create longing. Your presence, measured and balanced, becomes a standard they cannot ignore. Your absence then acts as a magnifying lens, forcing them to evaluate not just what they've lost, but what they were too fearful to fully appreciate in the moment. They begin to recognize that the emotional connection you offered was not overwhelming, but grounding, not clinging, but connective, not dependent, but liberating. The more space you give yourself to live fully, the more they are confronted with the reality that your value exists independently of their attention or validation. Avoidants may try to distract themselves, may bury their feelings, or may rationalize your absence away, but the truth is that the mind does not easily forget someone who provided emotional clarity without sacrificing their own worth. Space doesn't erase the impact you made, it sharpens it. Every moment of absence reminds them of what consistency, respect, and genuine care feel like. Your presence was never just a fleeting interaction. It was a standard of how healthy connection can exist, and the absence of that standard becomes a silent, persistent echo in their consciousness. In this way, distance is not a barrier. It is a mirror reflecting both the depth of what you offered and the void left behind when it is no longer immediately available. Your ability to move forward is what creates the real breakthrough in the mind of an avoidant, because avoidants are wired to notice strength and self-possession more than effort, chase, or desperation. When you continue to live your life fully, pursuing your goals, nurturing your passions, and prioritizing your own happiness, it sends a signal that you are not dependent on their presence for your fulfillment. This is profoundly disarming for someone who fears attachment, because it breaks the familiar patterns they've relied on to avoid intimacy. They are used to people bending around their avoidance, chasing after them, or restructuring their own lives to fit the avoidance comfort level. When you refuse to do this, you demonstrate that connection with you is not about control or compliance. It is about mutual respect and shared presence. Moving forward doesn't mean ignoring them or pretending they don't matter. It means holding your ground with confidence, dignity, and clarity, showing that your life is meaningful with or without their participation. Avoidance may initially interpret your movement forward as indifference, but over time, it becomes undeniable evidence of your value. They start to realize that you were never defined by their avoidance, that your world does not orbit their whims, and that the person they encountered was whole, self-sufficient, and emotionally resilient. This realization is powerful because it challenges their habitual defenses. They are forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. While they may have feared closeness, your independence and consistency are exactly what made you memorable. The more fully you step into your life, the more your presence, or rather the impact you had while present, resonates in their mind. It's a paradox. The less you try to fix them or control their emotions, the more profound your influence becomes. Moving forward also creates space for reflection, which is critical for an avoidant. When you maintain your own energy, focus on your own growth, and refuse to compromise your self-respect, it invites them to consider the consequences of their own actions. They may notice how moments of absence feel different, how silence now carries weight, and how the space you once filled remains irreplaceable. Your progress forces them to evaluate not just what they have lost, but what they may never find again. They begin to see that attachment is not synonymous with weakness, that intimacy does not require surrendering autonomy, and that the person they underestimated or overlooked brought balance, clarity, and emotional security that is rare in their experience. This is the real breakthrough. It is not achieved by chasing, pleading, or over-investing in someone who resists closeness. It is achieved through living authentically, prioritizing self-respect, and embracing your own worth. Your actions silently communicate that love, connection, and care are strongest when they are grounded in integrity and independence. Avoidants may resist this realization at first, but it lingers in their consciousness, challenging their avoidance patterns and leaving a lasting impression. Your ability to move forward with intention and self-possession transforms the dynamic, shifting it from one defined by pursuit and fear into one defined by clarity, awareness, and undeniable emotional gravity. Avoidants don't miss you because you chased them or made yourself emotionally available at every turn. They miss you because you are unforgettable. Your impact on them is not measured by how much effort you invested in trying to win their attention, but by the way you showed up fully as yourself, grounded, confident, and emotionally aware. Avoidants are often surrounded by people who either accommodate their fears or mirror their avoidance. And in that environment, someone who demonstrates self-possession and integrity stands out immediately. You didn't beg for connection, you didn't try to control their responses, and you didn't dilute your worth to make them comfortable. Instead, you showed up in a way that was steady, authentic, and magnetic, which creates an impression that lingers far longer than any fleeting interaction. What makes someone unforgettable to an avoidant is not the drama, the chase, or the vulnerability imposed on them. It is the quiet power, emotional clarity, and authenticity that cannot be ignored. The unforgettable quality comes from the way you handled yourself in the spaces they feared. You respected your own boundaries while still offering warmth, care, and attentiveness. You engaged with their world without collapsing into it, and you maintained your own rhythm, goals, and emotional integrity. This balance is disarming for avoidants because it forces them to confront a reality they often avoid, that relationships can exist without fear, pressure, or imbalance. It's not about controlling them. It's about showing them that connection can be a place of stability and safety. Over time, these small but consistent actions create a lasting imprint in their mind. Every thoughtful word, every patient gesture, every moment of emotional consistency contributes to an internal narrative that they cannot easily rewrite or forget. Avoidants notice patterns, and the pattern you create is one of integrity, respect, and emotional intelligence. Unlike those who chase, argue, or compromise their own needs, your presence demonstrates that a meaningful connection is built on equality, clarity, and mutual understanding. They begin to associate you not just with specific memories, but with a standard of interaction that feels rare and precious. It's not about perfection. It's about the way you exist fully in your own life while being present, caring, and consistent. This duality, being emotionally available without losing yourself, is what leaves them thinking of you long after you are gone. They may try to rationalize their feelings or dismiss the emotional impact, but memories of how you made them feel linger. They remember the steadiness that contrasted with their own chaos, the patience that contrasted with their fear, and the way you respected yourself while respecting them. They realize, consciously or unconsciously, that your presence offered something they rarely encountered, a connection that was both safe and deeply resonant. Your unforgettable nature lies not in the moments of drama or passion, but in the quiet, consistent, and intentional ways you showed up. In the end, avoidants miss you because you embodied a standard of emotional maturity and authenticity that cannot be replicated easily. You were never someone who tried to fit into their avoidance. You were someone who existed fully, intentionally, and with unwavering self-respect. That combination leaves a mark that lingers far longer than any superficial memory or fleeting interaction, making you unforgettable, unavoidable, and profoundly impactful in their life. In conclusion, understanding the dynamic between an avoidant and someone who carries themselves with clarity, self-respect, and emotional integrity reveals a powerful truth. Connection is not about chasing or pleading, but about showing up fully as yourself. Your presence, your boundaries, and your unwavering authenticity leave a mark that lingers far longer than any attempt to control or pursue. Whether or not the avoidant chooses to return, your impact remains undeniable and your value is never diminished. Thank you all for listening and taking the time to reflect on the power of living with intention, emotional strength, and self-worth.